to start with a quick poll question though. I want to get a feeling for who's in this room. So, with a raise of hands, how many of you have ever lived or worked abroad for more than 3 months? Okay, it looks like about, maybe a quarter of you. My name's Andy Molinsky. I'm a professor at Brandeis International Business School. I am also the author of Global Dexterity and the new book, Reach. The focus of my work is on helping people learn to act outside their comfort zone and also have the courage to act outside their comfort zone. Sometimes that means interacting across cultures in situations that are uncomfortable or challenging. And at other times it has nothing to do with culture at all. It has to do with stepping outside your comfort zone in everyday life. We're going to talk about global dexterity or global flexibility today. That's our focus. And we're going to talk about people, just like you, just like me, about learning to be flexible across cultures. But I actually want to start by talking about companies. Companies are going global, but in order to be effective globally, you need to understand local markets, understand local tastes, and adapt to the local customs. So, for example, when McDonald's went into India, the famous Big Mac, the 2 all-beef patty Big Mac in the United States that I grew up with here just wasn't going to work in India because many people in India don't eat beef. So instead, McDonald's didn't say we're not going into India, but they did go into India, but they catered to the local tastes. So they created the chicken Maharaja Mac, and they created the McVeggie. So you get the idea here that companies are going global, but catering to local tastes. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because today we're not going to talk about companies, we're talking about people today. But I wanted to make an analogy. So companies going global, catering to local tastes, but at the same time, companies of course don't want to lose who they are in the process. They have to retain their corporate brand, their corporate image, their true North Star of who they are. And the same thing goes for people. And that's what global dexterity is about. Global dexterity is the ability to adapt your behavior smoothly and successfully, but without losing yourself in the process. We always talk about how companies are globalizing and how our economy is globalizing, but it's not companies that are globalizing, it's people. It's people who have to negotiate across cultures. It's people who have to step outside their cultural comfort zones and give feedback in a different way that they're used to, or make small talk in a different way that they're used to, or run a meeting in a different way. So in order for globalization to work at a broad level, at an economic level, individual people need to be able to have the capacity and the courage to step outside their cultural comfort zones. And so that's why global dexterity is so critical. So when I talk about global dexterity and culture in general, I tend to talk about culture and cultural differences in 2 different ways. I talk about easy situations of cultural difference and harder situations of cultural difference. And I want to start with the easier ones today. Anyone know how to exchange a business card in Japan? Anyone ever done it? Know how? Yeah? Stand up. That was pretty good. Come on up. You showed your expertise. What's your name?
Rafael.
Rafael. Okay, good to meet you. Okay. If you were to exchange a business card with me in Japan, what would you do? You showed me before.
Cool.
Okay, good. So, right? Okay, yeah. As you saw here, Rafael bowed, right? He didn't bow too much, but he bowed, right? He showed respect. He held the card with how many hands? 2 hands, showing respect. And Sharon, did you mention that? Sharon mentioned, and you couldn't see back there, but the card needs to be facing me, the receiver, in terms of letters, because that's a sign of respect. How we exchange business cards in the United States. Have you ever done that before? Yeah, so here we go. So, hey, Raphael. Oh, thanks, cool. Oh, awesome. Yeah, great. Right. So you saw the differences. This would not be that hard for you to learn, right? In fact, you all just learned it, right? So that's why I say that it's a relatively easy case of cultural adaptation. The rules are different, but it doesn't deeply conflict probably with your deep cultural values to learn to do that. Would it for you? No, probably not. However, many of the situations that you will experience, that I've experienced living and working abroad, I'd put into the slightly harder category. Let me give you a sense of what I mean here. A great example of global dexterity comes from an American manager, a pretty experienced American manager that I interviewed and worked with for the book Global Dexterity. And he went to Germany because he wanted to have more experience internationally. When I talked to him, I asked him to identify the single greatest challenge that he experienced in Germany. And without skipping a beat, he said feedback. Immediately he said feedback, and I was interested, so I asked him to explain why. And so what he said was that in the United States, as many of us are familiar, feedback is something that you do oftentimes in what we call a feedback sandwich. It's an analogy, so the pieces of bread are positive, ego-stroking feedback. Right, you've done this before. Yeah, you might go on and that might be the critical feedback, and that's the meat in the sandwich. And then you go back to the bread. So that's almost like the classic American style of giving feedback, the feedback sandwich. Now, what was so challenging for this American manager going to Germany was that in Germany, there was no bread. There was no bread. It was just the meat. It was just the straightforward, super frank message, you didn't do this right, you need to change it. Now for my colleague, that was very difficult to do. He said he felt like an ogre doing it. He felt incredibly inauthentic and uncomfortable delivering feedback in this way. What got him through it though, was his ability to step outside his own cultural perspective and actually think like a German. So from the German perspective, it was interesting that the American style, the feedback sandwich style, feels evasive, it feels dishonest. And the German style, just the meat, right, just the meat, that style was honest. It was efficient, it was straightforward, it was consistent with core German values. And it was hard for him to make the switch, but one thing that really helped him was understanding that German perspective on the situation. And he developed the conviction that was necessary for him to be able to make that cultural shift. And he did it, and he did it well. I hope that my audiences gain insight, courage, willingness, and just a little bit of motivation to try to step outside their comfort zones. With my talks, I try to really give people a simple, usable framework for them to understand the challenges that they face in acting outside their comfort zones, and then the ways that they can actually learn to step outside their comfort zones.